I want to start off the video by telling you straight away that I'm not going to be telling you the same things you've heard everyone else say 1,000 times before when it comes to drafting and team comps. We already know that the best team comps have mixed damage types, good frontline, wave clear, and engage. It just doesn't need to be repeated again by me. These things are already universally understood by everyone that plays League to be good. But my god, are they surface level draft concepts, and they miss the majority of what actually matters when it comes to picking your champion. So here's what actually matters. These are the real things that actually matter to a draft that I learned myself over years of playing on pro teams. But don't worry, everything I talk about won't stay locked in this idealized world of pro play that just isn't useful for solo queue. Surprisingly enough, the drafting techniques that I have to talk to you about in this video are far more impactful for solo queue than anything you're likely to know about draft at this point. So if you're in queue right now, maybe hold off just a couple more minutes and give the video a watch first. It might just give you the edge you need in Champion Select to win your next game.
My name's Rogue and I played League of Legends professionally for 7 years. Now I'm a full-time content creator and coach for all ranks Iron through to Challenger. So if you want more information of what a coaching session with me will look like, you can find more information by following the link in the video description below.
Take a look at this team composition. Do you think it's good or bad? Well, it has an even split between physical and magic damage. It has good wave clear and scaling with Victor Caitlyn, some engage and peak potential with Lee Sin and Blitzcrank, but despite this team comp is absolutely terrible. The reason it's terrible is simple. This team composition lacks the most important element when it comes to drafting, individual champion synergies. Just look at Lee Sin as a jungler for example. In the early levels when Lee Sin goes for a gank, what is he missing that most junglers have? The answer is crowd control. He has none, and so he therefore is reliant on his laners to provide the crowd control for him. But with his solo laners Rumble and Victor, they also have none, so ganks are just literally impossible to execute in 2 out of the 3 lanes that he has. You need 2 things to make a gank work, damage and crowd control. Lee Sin has the damage, so if you pair him with a mid laner like Syndra, TF, or Lissandra, they will bring the crowd control. Or if we want to keep the Victor pick, that's fine as well. We can instead replace Lee Sin with a jungler like Jarvan, who has a knock-up, which thus covers Victor's weakness as a laner. 2 champion synergies like this are amazing for solo queue, because they simply transcend elo. Iron players, regardless of how bad they are at the game, are far more likely to execute a successful gank if they have some crowd control in their 2v2 than if they didn't. Now in pro play, the most important 2 champion synergy that exists for your entire team is that between your jungler and your support. This is because in high level play, these roles spend a ton of time together and are always at the core of early game 3v3 fights, which seems to matter even more now since every game is just decided by a Void Grub fight in 6 minutes, which contains usually these 2 champions. The best example of this is by looking at the champion Karthus. Here are the stats taken from all major region pro games played in 2024 that include a Karthus in them. And this is a list of what support champions were played on the same team as the Karthus. Do you notice these champions have something in common? Well, literally all of them are engaged champions. Not only do these champions have the gank setup that Karthus lacks as a jungler, but they make it super easy for him to hit his Qs because they have crowd control. But did you know what pro players don't play? Is Karthus Lulu. In the last 10 years of pro play, Lulu Karthus has only ever appeared on the same team one single time, and they lost, because Karthus doesn't do anything with the attack speed that Lulu would give him. So if you want to play Karthus, pair it with Nautilus or Leona, and if you want to play Lulu, pair it with Olaf or Xin Zhao. Those guys love attack speed and shields. Next up, we got to talk about ultimate synergies. To do this, let's bring back up our example of a bad draft and check out the ulti combos. Yeah, there's not much happening here. This can be most easily seen by looking at the game from the perspective of our Rumble. Rumble has a super powerful ultimate, laying fire on the ground that can single-handedly kill off the entire enemy team, if they're forced to stand in it. For that reason, Rumble synergizes with and is best comboed with teammates who have ultimates that have crowd control or walls, because that forces the enemy to stand in his ultimate. And all this team has is a 0.5 second knock-up on Blitzcrank's E. Again, when we look at the popular pairings with Rumble in pro play, you can see the top pairing supports that were played with Rumble on the same team. They are again all engaged supports, with Nautilus at the very top, because they have such a strong synergy together when they lay their ultimates on the same target. Now my idea of picking Jarvan is starting to look even better. He can trap the enemy in both Rumble and Victor ultimate, synergizing well with both of these champs in another way. Now maybe we could also do with the better support, so let's try and swap out Blitzcrank for something like Leona so she can also get in on the fun with her ulti. There's just one final champion combo that needs to be addressed quickly before we can move on to a different subject, and that's our bot lane. Caitlyn is a champion who can only play with a poke support, yet she has a support who can only all-in. This is the case with some ADCs. Samira, for example, is the opposite. Samira can only play with an engaged support, and she would be depressed anytime she has to lead with something like a Soraka. For this reason, our bot lane doesn't really work well together right now, so let's swap out our ADC pick for something a little bit more neutral like Jinx. Now, I just said a keyword you may not have really paid much attention to. That was that I called Jinx a neutral champion because she can be paired with both types of supports, Engage and Enchanters. She simply works with both. Neutral champion picks exist in all roles and are extremely important to solo queue drafting, which gives me a nice transition into talking about pick order, blind picks, and champion select in itself. Now, something to remember when you blind pick in solo queue is that the champion you pick can be counterpicked not only by your opponent, but also by your teammates. So if you pick something one-dimensional, like Samira, that must be played with Engage in the support role, well, your support might just pick Sona anyway, and now bot lane is completely unplayable. The same goes for setting up those jungle ganks. If you want to open with something like blind pick Graves, again, you're relying on your teammates to have the setup for you. So if they go and pick Garen top and Katarina mid, this is the team comp we have now. We don't have any champion synergies. Our bot lanes are different archetypes. Our jungler can't gank for literally any of the 3 lanes that he has because there's just no crowd control anywhere. What's better to do instead is to open up with a neutral champion, something like a Philios or Jinx. Philios and Jinx are medium to long range ADCs that can be played with melee and range supports. The same goes for picking a jungler. Instead of blind picking something without setup, blind picking something a little bit open-ended like the Jarvan, or if you're a mid laner, for example, blind picking the Syndra, it doesn't matter what you get paired with because you have the damage and you have the setup. So most of the time when you're drafting in solo queue, you want to make sure you have at least one thing in your champion pool like this that can kind of be a multi-tool that fits into any comp and works with any jungle or lane pairing. The idea of neutral champion picks is a huge reason for why we have a somewhat standardized pick order in pro play for the last 10 years. Drafts usually look a little bit like this. First, we open with whatever OP champion there is on the patch, or whatever flex pick your team might play. Outside of this though, things mainly look the same. An opening pick will most likely be an ADC and or a jungler. Jungle counter picks don't matter too much because you don't directly lane against your counterpart, and most of what decides the bot lane's matchup is the support matchup, not the ADCs. What's important though is that you can easily pick neutral champions in these 2 roles, especially with ADC, with almost every mid to long range ADC being a neutral champion pick. Then you simply copy your opponent, counterpicking the roles that they pick the entire way down the draft so you get good matchups everywhere. What's great about doing this is that you don't get locked into having to play a specific style of team composition too early into the draft. If you first pick something like Lulu for example, this instantly removes your team's ability to play a ton of champions in other roles, notably a couple of which we've already covered like Rumble, Karthus, and Samira. Committing to a specific style of team composition too early into the draft is generally a pretty bad thing to do, because you leave yourself open to being stylistically countered, which is what we'll talk about next. But real quick before I do, I want to take just 20 seconds to shell out my Patreon. You see, YouTube ad revenue quite frankly just sucks, and it's only because of my current Patreons I have right now that I can justify the time it takes to make a video a week on YouTube for you guys. Over on my Patreon, I upload almost daily recordings of my best coaching sessions for you to watch and learn from, all sorted by role and rank. So if it's within your means and you want to help support me and maybe even get some extra content of mine, that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, of course, you can instead just subscribe and continue to watch my videos for free over on YouTube. Now, where were we? That's right, stylistic counters. Sometimes a champion pick is just so good you have to pick it. One of the most famous examples of this is from this famous clip.
Go Vayne.
Now we have to go Corky.
No, Olaf got you. Alistair, we're going Vayne, by the way.
Are you serious?
It's Trundle Vayne.
Shouldn't we just go Corky?
but are you
like-
serious? Is it gonna win us the game?
Of course.
We could see the Corki again.
Yeah, good Corki again.
Whoa! That's a Vayne mid lane!
Caps was right here. When versing 4 melee tank champions, Vayne is just situationally amazing. This is most easily seen with a lot of top lane bruiser champions such as Darius. Darius is completely immobile and incredibly susceptible to being kited, which is why he's almost never seen in pro play. If you open up a draft with the blind pick Darius, you might end up versing an entire team comp of long range champions with a ton of crowd control, and you would just never get in range of your opponent. It's completely unplayable. But picking Darius against short range enemy compositions is just heaven on earth. You don't need to worry about getting kited if the enemy team is also made up of melee champions, completely negating Darius' biggest weakness. Maybe this is something you already knew to a certain extent, but what you probably didn't think about is stylistic synergies. Take a look at this game from Worlds 2024. Famously, this is where the top laner for BDS, Adam, picked Darius on the world stage. The enemy has a ton of crowd control on their comp this game. They don't have the longest range composition in the world, but they've still got 3 ranged champions. So what gives here? How did Adam get away with this Darius pick into such a CC heavy and long range enemy team composition? Well, that has a ton to do with the champion picks of his own teammates. BDS's carries are playing Syndra and Ezreal. Syndra outranges her counterpart Nico, and Ezreal massively outranges his counterpart Kai'Sa. So in a poke battle, BDS's team comp will just simply win. Also to note is that BDS has 2 super tanks with Rel and Alistar against the much squishier Viego and Rakan, meaning in a front-to-back teamfight, BDS would simply kill the enemy frontline first. This puts the enemy team in a difficult position. They're forced to engage as their carries are being outranged and outpoked. And when they do engage, they have to get onto the backline and get on the carries since they won't win a back-to-front teamfight. This is where the Darius pick comes in. If we put the Darius right on top of our carries, and then we have to dive onto our carries, well, now the Darius is in range. On one of my former pro teams, this was the exact drafting style we used to do with Gwen instead of Darius. If you try to dive on top of a Gwen, you just get destroyed, while your ranged champions can't follow up because they're met with this annoying Gwen is immune message. So what we would do is play Gwen with Kog'Maw Lulu. You have to dive onto Kog'Maw Lulu to kill them, everyone knows that. But if you dive onto Gwen, who is standing in front of the Kog'Maw Lulu, well, you can't do that, can you? This also works out super well because both champions have amazing individual synergies with Lulu, and that's what everything circles back to. Individual synergies. Thresh's Lantern makes him super good with the mobile ADCs. Viego needs a kill to get a reset, so he's often paired with Lissandra and Nautilus who can easily secure him one. And Nocturne works super well with Orianna because there's no way to avoid the double ulti combo. And this is what we really need to look out for in draft. So next time you go into Champion Select, don't worry so much about picking the perfect teamfight comp. You're playing solo queue, your teamfights will probably never group up anyway. Instead, make sure to blind pick a neutral champion that pairs well with anything your teammates might pick. Or when late picking in the draft, make sure to pair up good individual and ultimate synergies with your teammates, especially with your jungler or your lane partner in bot lane. Those synergies might just be the edge you need to win that next game. And as always everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day.